said something earlier, and you've actually said it twice this weekend, and you said it yesterday or this week, excuse me. You said it yesterday, and I didn't really ask you to expand on it, but you said it again today when we were talking about the Kings, and room for improvement and guys who can improve, and what steps this team could take to be better. And you've mentioned De'Aaron Fox twice,
Mhm.
and I'm curious, like, what do you want to see better from De'Aaron Fox? Or let me rephrase that. What do you think we can see better, or what do you think we could see different from De'Aaron Fox next year?
Okay, so first up, I think if
Because
you
clearly he's not doing enough for you, so I want to make sure.
no, I
I'm
think he's doing
just
a
kidding.
ton. Like I think he had a very very good season, and I think the where I believe that he can improve. Number one, he can be a better 3-point shooter, which he
Mm-hmm.
understands, and it's something he's going to work on nonstop during the offseason, right? It's something that he always works on, but it's something that he's going to focus on. But I also think that, like we've talked about this in the past, like the leveling out of the ups and downs. And when you reach a certain point, we always talk about, like, okay, so when you get into the league, you want to make it the starting five, right? And if you're a first round pick, a high first round pick, you're like, okay, I want to be all rookie, I want to all those things. But then you get to a certain point in your career where you're just like, for De'Aaron, you're like a near all-star level player, and you couldn't get over the hump. He got over the hump this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's got to all NBA. Now he's played in the playoffs. Like he now understands that there's a different, first of all, you need better players around you to help you along the way, for sure. But there's also a point where you understand that the game gets more difficult, and the intensity gets bigger and the moments get bigger. And I think he just understood all of that, and he rose to the occasion. And clearly he had the finger issue, which was a problem, which limited who he was in the final couple of games of the playoffs. But what we were able to see from him was pretty spectacular. And I think that he's a player that is going to learn and take from this season in particular what it's like to get that kind of fanfare, to get that kind of love. And he's going to embrace it, and he's going to make that the new standard for him. And that's how I think he can get better. And I think he can get better by being more efficient, by being a better leader, by being a better defensive player. But these are all things that he's gotten better at as we've moved along throughout his career. And I think he'll just take another logical step. And it's from the step from all-star, fringe all-star, to all-star who gets in on a medical replacement, to a full-fledged all-star and an all-NBA player that, like, wants to cement his place among the top 15 players in the league. And I think we're going to see that step from De'Aaron Fox. And whether that's 27 points and 8 assists a game, or it's right around the same, 25 and 6 or 25 and 7, we're just going to see it be better. It's going to be more consistent. It's going to be every night. It's going to be just the version of him that we keep seeing that keeps improving.
So to kind of take something Kyle Draper said earlier about what the Kings did this year won't be good enough next year. And he went on to talk about the West and all that. We could talk about that tomorrow. But we take that and isolate it off of the Kings and put it on De'Aaron. De'Aaron does what he did this year next year. Is that good enough to be an all NBA player? Good enough to be an all-star?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and once you get there, you're
Because I
there.
wonder how much the story, like,
You mean if they're not the feel good stories?
right.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that they're going to be like, this team
Like,
looks
does he
like,
have to be that much better because of that? Because of
maybe.
the story?
Yeah, this team looks like a team that's set up over the next like 4 or 5 years to be anywhere from 2 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think getting to 1, I mean, they would have to have some sort of major adjustment happen. Like, someone big would have to walk in the door, or something extraordinary would have to happen with a guy like Keegan Murray or something for you to take the leap.
Or Jokic is gone for 82 games.
Yeah, or yeah, someone's gone. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, to be a legit number one,
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I would look. And people can say, well, what do you mean he can get better, right? He or his stats could be the same, but he's a better player. And I would point to this, and, like, don't think of this as I'm comparing uh De'Aaron Fox to Michael Jordan, but In like year 3 of Michael Jordan's career, he averaged 37.1 points per game. He never averaged 37 points a game ever again. And it took until I think year 8 for him to win a championship. And each of those championship years, he was like really, really exceptional, but they weren't nearly as good statistically as some of his earlier seasons. And you can be a much better player without the statistics showing it. But everyone else in the building can see it and feel it, whether it's you're a better defensive player, you're more efficient, or you're better in big moment situations. Like there's a way that you mature and grow into the player you're going to be, and you just become better. And so that's what I expect from him. I expect him to be a better version of himself. And he still is a player with the most untapped potential, in my opinion, on that roster
Mm,
outside of Keegan Murray.
mm,
Like Keegan Murray, it's because his starting point is at 12 points a game and a rookie, and we know that he can be much better than that.
mhm. You've always comped De'Aaron Fox to Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
And one, it still checks out. It still works. But the great footnote to this is in terms of like where they were in their career, next season for Russell Westbrook, would in terms of how many years they were in their career, that was when Russ went from 23 points per game, 21 points per game to 28 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
And he was 28, 7, and 8 in that run. He had already been an all-star. He had been an all-star 3 times at that point. But his game in his 6-7 season elevated. And Kenny and I were looking at this earlier because that obviously, I'm a Russell Westbrook guy. That comp is always stuck in my head. And looking at what De'Aaron could do next, if you stuck with the comp of Russell Westbrook, you see, oh my God, he continues on this track. And again, if you look at it, the numbers pan out year after year after year after year with the De'Aaron and Russell Westbrook comp. He could, I mean, in the next year, the following year, his points per game went down, but his assists went to double digits for the first time. Then the year after that, of course, that's when Kevin Durant was gone. He went to 31 points per game, 10 assists, 10 rebounds, won the MVP. But I love that comp, and I love because I know De'Aaron Fox is also a Russell Westbrook fan. I love that comp and what it could potentially mean if it continues to track the same way for De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, like, and just because I don't think De'Aaron's ever going to be the rebounder that Russell is, but that doesn't mean that he can't be equally as good or equally as effective as Westbrook. Like I've always thought De'Aaron has a much better shot selection than Russ. Neither one of them have ever been great perimeter shooters, but even Fox, I would take Fox's mid range jump shot over Russ's most of the time. And I just think that like we can't look at them like it's not going to be a disappointment if he doesn't reach the level that Russ reached statistically.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't think he's ever going to be on a team where it's literally just him and a guy like Durant. Like because that's not how the Kings are built. That's not with Sabonis. It's going to be him and Sabonis, but that's not going to be a situation where like, where I got in trouble with Russ and KD years ago where I asked him about, 3 games in a row in the Western Conference Finals, they shot a combined 59 shots.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that that's going to be who the Kings become, where it's just these two guys shooting all of the shots. That's a lot of shots.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that he'll continue to hit all of those markers, but I expect him to be a better player this coming year.
Well, and there were some pretty drastic changes in here. If I could see De'Aaron continuing to hit these markers, but the numbers just went incredible when Kevin Durant left. Like
Yeah.
his entire role with the Oklahoma City Thunder had to change when Kevin Durant left, and that's
Yeah.
why you saw 1, 2, 3, 4 straight years of averaging 10 plus assists. That's why. Well, shoot, it was 3 straight years of averaging a triple double. Like
Mhm.
that's why that happened. But it's De'Aaron is still a fascinating what if. De'Aaron is still not a what if. He's a fascinating what's next because we're also I think we're also from people who have watched him from jump. We're also happy for him to finally have this moment where he's recognized as one of the league's great players. You're a top 15 player. You're an All Pro player. That's the
Yeah.
category that you're in. And now it's like, okay, that's cool. He's not gonna settle. So what's next? And now it's a year under his belt of not only playing with Domantas Sabonis, but playing with Mike Brown as well. It's his first year in the NBA playing with a competent team for an entire season, playing, with playoff, having playoff expectations, quiet playoff expectations during the season. Now those playoff expectations next year are going to be really loud. And and this is what I think all of us talked about um, towards the end of last season when it was clear that the Sacramento Kings are going to make the playoffs was enjoy this moment, enjoy how you feel, enjoy the Portland game when it's clinched and all of that because next year it's not going to feel like this.
Mhm.
Next year the Sacramento Kings are going to be a bigger story in the NBA. And we could talk about the Western Conference and all of that tomorrow because you brought up something that I think is a much longer discussion. But the Sacramento Kings have a very real chance of being near the top of this conference, as you just said, 2-6. Next year, I can see them closer to the 2 spot again for reasons that'll take a long time to explain. So we'll talk about them tomorrow. But another reason that he could potentially step up. You talk about untapped potential
Mhm.
with De'Aaron. It's on that defensive end.
Oh
Like
yeah.
just this year, we saw growth on the defensive end. I'd argue we saw a lot of growth on the defensive end. We've always known what he's been capable of doing offensively. We've seen him take steps in his growth on the offensive end. This was the first time where it was like he was consistently a better defender. This is what Doug Christie's been talking about for years. We saw signs of that. We saw a lot of signs of that. We saw regular play of him being a two-way player, of him being a strong defender. That to me, when you talk about room for growth, that might be where the most room for growth is on that defensive side of the ball.
Well, and I'll also point something out too. Like, defense is a funny thing, right? So the Kings are one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, no question. Like, I'm not going to defend anything that happened. They were bad defensively, but I kind of look at it the same way we talked about Jason Tatum earlier. When the 3-point shots start falling for his teammates, for him and his teammates, but for his teammates, that's when the space is created, right? So with De'Aaron Fox, I'll kind of flip it the other side. If you had better defenders around him, it would actually help him be a better defender. Like, that's the way it works. Like, if you have great defenders flanking you, if you have better length and athleticism around you, then it does help you become a better defender. It closes some of the gaps, some of the spacing that the other team is dealing with. It gives you like the inline drive behind you. Like, it gives you more confidence to stay in front of your player, but also knowing that you have someone behind you that can block a shot. That changes the way that you defend. And if they are able to put better defenders around him, I expect him to even take a bigger step defensively. Because having those guys, not having to cover somebody or not playing out of position, not running over trying to help, and then having to get back to your guy, all of these things play into, if you can raise the level overall of the team, you can be better. And so I think he's a guy that needs he needs shooters to be at his best as an offensive player, but he also could use length and athleticism for him to be his best on the defensive end around him. Like, I think if you can add the right players around him, it doesn't matter how far a quarterback can throw a football. If he doesn't have a left tackle, he's in trouble.
Mm.
Right. And so I feel like a lot of the time that we claim that this guy's a bad defender, that guy's a bad defender. Well, it's very possible that like De'Aaron Fox looks like a much worse defender because the guy to his right and the guy to his left are leaving the gaps too big. They're
Yeah.
not closing up space. They're not doing the things that they need to do that makes life simpler for him to defend. And so I expect them to really attack this type of issue in free agency through the draft and through trade coming up.
A coach once told me it can be it's really tough to be critical of guys on the defensive end. Now, obviously, there are times where it's very clear the defender missed something or just got beat.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, the way it was explained to me is kind of what you just said. You don't know what his teammates were supposed to do. He could have played that exactly the way the coaches taught him to play it and told him to play it and demanded that he play it and practiced that he played it. And two other guys missed what they were supposed to do, or one other guy missed what they were supposed to do, or they were just slow at it. Sometimes that stuff is easier to spot than others. And then sometimes you just see, whew, they got beat. That's sometimes pretty easy to spot. But you talked about, one thing that I keep getting hung up on, I don't know how much better this team is going to be defensively next year.
I think they're going to be better. Like, I think but again, I told you, I look at the limitations of the guards and I see that there's a problem. Like, your best defensive guard is going to play 15 minutes a night.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough to make an impact. It doesn't matter how good defensively Kessler Edwards is. If he doesn't play, he can't be great defensively.
Davion really has to make defenses pay, because in the biggest moment of the season, the Warriors said, go ahead.
Yeah, beat
shoot
us.
it.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Go ahead. Because 5 ain't going to do it. Go ahead. And he made them pay in game 1. He hit a huge 3 in game 1, and game 1 or 2. I can't remember which one, but he hit a huge 3. But that was kind of it. And they let him shoot those final couple of games, two of the final 3 games of the series. They go ahead, shoot it. And he did. And they kept playing him the same way. And that's he has to make them pay. And I know there were times he tried to veer away from that 3-point shot and attack the basket. And the downside, and I appreciate that mindset, but the downside to that is they were just there waiting for him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we'll let you shoot. Oh, go ahead, drive, because there's 3 of us here. And it just put him in a bad spot. It put Davion in a really, really bad spot.
Yeah, and that's why I keep saying, like, it's possible that, like, they do make other adjustments in that backcourt. Like, it's possible that we don't see the same starting lineup. It's possible that we see a different backup point guard. Like, I think if you're going to get better defensively, you need more length, you need more athleticism, and you need more 3-point shooting. That comes at every single position. That's not just at the small forward or the 5. Like, you need that at every single position on the court. And that's what I think the Kings are going to do. They're going to attack this in a very specific way, and they're going to try to get better. And so, I mean, we already know they're chasing Sasha Vezenkov really tough, really hard. But
he's not exactly Akeem Olajuwon, though, is he?
But he's none of these things that they, outside of the 3-point shooting. But it does allow you, if you have Sasha, it makes you have the ability to go get a more defensive-minded 5 or more defensive-minded 3, because all of a sudden you aren't losing your shooting when you go to the bench. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a piece to the puzzle, but it's really complicated, and they've got a lot of work to do to put it together. And I expect, again, like 30-40% of the roster to change. And that's not because I don't think that, like, these guys don't deserve jobs or something. It's that you got to keep improving and keep adjusting, and what you need, the length and the athleticism you need, you got to go get it. And it doesn't matter how you do it, but you got to do it.